Welcome to Reddit's For Sleep, where every story is your escape into calm. If this video helps you relax or drift off tonight, gently tap that like button so we can keep making more just like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and let us tuck you in with a fresh hour of stories every single night. Story 1. My ex tried to ruin my wedding, but my dad had other plans. If you told me a year ago that my quiet, drama-free life would end up like something out of a made-for-TV movie, I would have laughed. I've always been the type who avoids conflict. Head down, mind my business. But when you cross paths with someone toxic enough, avoiding drama becomes impossible. This all started last spring, just 3 months before my wedding. I was 29, living in upstate New York, working as a graphic designer, and engaged to Aaron, the most patient, grounded man I've ever met. Aaron was the kind of person who calmed storms just by being in the room. And after my chaotic relationship with my ex, Chris, that calm was everything I needed. Chris and I had dated on and off for 4 years. The kind of relationship where you break up, swear you're done, then get sucked back in. He was charming, funny, and when things were good, they were really good. But when things were bad, let's just say Chris didn't handle emotions well. He'd ghost me for days after an argument, then show up at my apartment at 2 a.m. crying about how he couldn't live without me. The last time we broke up, I told him, "This isn't healthy for either of us. I can't do this anymore." And for a while, it seemed like he understood. Or so I thought. Aaron proposed on a crisp autumn afternoon in Central Park, under a canopy of golden leaves. It was quiet, simple, perfect. We set the wedding date for May. Small ceremony, close family and friends, nothing fancy. I didn't even post about it much, just a single photo of my ring on Instagram. That's how Chris found out. 2 weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number at midnight. "You really think you can just forget about me? We're not done." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I blocked the number. The messages kept coming, from different numbers, different emails. "He doesn't love you like I do. You're making a mistake. You belong to me." Sometimes he'd send old photos of us together. Sometimes it was voicemails. His voice slurred, promising he'd win me back. Aaron knew about Chris. I hadn't hidden anything from him, but I didn't want to scare him with the escalation. I thought if I ignored Chris long enough, he'd get bored. But Chris wasn't the type to get bored. 2 weeks before the wedding, my dad called me. "You home right now?" he asked, voice tight. "Yeah. Why?" "Stay inside. Lock the doors." "Dad, what's going on?" He sighed. "Chris showed up at the house, said he needed to talk to you. When I told him to leave, he got aggressive." My stomach dropped. That night, Aaron and my dad sat me down. "Enough is enough," Aaron said gently. "We're not letting him ruin this for us." My dad nodded. "Let me handle him. You just focus on your wedding." The day of the wedding arrived. Cloudless sky, soft breeze. Everything as perfect as it could be. Halfway through the ceremony, as I stood holding Aaron's hands, I noticed movement at the back of the small chapel. Chris. He was standing in the doorway, disheveled, eyes wild. "I object," he shouted. The entire room went still. Aaron didn't move, but my dad did. I didn't even see him get up. One moment Chris standing there, and the next my father, a retired Navy officer who still carried himself like he was in uniform, was in front of him, gripping his arm. "You're leaving, now." "Let me go. She loves me, not him," Chris shouted, trying to twist free. "Son, if you don't walk out on your own, you're going out in cuffs." My dad nodded to the 2 off-duty cops we'd hired for security. His idea, not mine. They stepped forward, calm but firm. Chris's face crumpled. You'll regret this, he hissed at me. No, I said softly. I won't. That was the last time I saw Chris. My dad filed a restraining order the next day. Erin and I went on our honeymoon to Maine, spent a week in a cozy cabin by the lake. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how different things could have been if my dad hadn't stepped in. And I whisper a silent thank you for the quiet life I have now. Story 2. My brother tried to steal our family home, but my grandma outsmarted him. If you grew up in a big family, there's always that one person who stirs the pot. In my family, it was my older brother, Kyle. Kyle was the golden child growing up, at least in my parents' eyes. He got away with everything. Bad grades. He's just not applying himself. Staying out all night at 17. Boys will be boys. Meanwhile, I, the younger sister by 4 years, got grounded for breathing wrong. It was fine. I kept my head down, worked hard, and built my own life. But I never imagined Kyle's selfishness would lead to him trying to take the one thing that meant the most to all of us. Grandma's house. Our grandma, Evelyn, was a force of nature, 82 years old, and still gardening every morning, baking her famous pecan pies every Sunday, and telling anyone who'd listen about the value of family. Her house, an old 2-story colonial on the edge of town, had been in the family for generations. Peeling white paint, creaky floorboards, a big wraparound porch with a swing, where I spent countless summers reading books. It wasn't just a house. It was home. When Grandma fell ill last winter, we all knew she wouldn't be with us much longer. She called me one evening in February. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "promise me you'll keep the house in the family. Don't let anyone sell it." "Of course, Grandma," I said, choking back tears. "I promise." After she passed, everything felt surreal. Then the will was read. Grandma left the house to me. Not Kyle, not my parents, me. I was shocked. Kyle was furious. She must have been confused, he said at the lawyer's office, his voice tight. She wouldn't just leave the house to her. She was perfectly lucid when she wrote her will, the lawyer replied coolly. She knew I was planning to move back to town. Kyle snapped. It makes more sense for me to have it. I'm the oldest. I stayed quiet. That night, Kyle showed up at my apartment. "You don't even need the house," he said, pacing my tiny living room. "You've got your career, your city life. What are you going to do with a falling apart old colonial?" I was going to fix it up," I said softly. "Don't be ridiculous. Sell it to me. I'll give you a fair price." "It's not about the money." "Then what's it about?" I stared at him, heart pounding. Grandma wanted me to have it. Over the next few weeks, Kyle tried everything. He guilt-tripped me. He called our parents and turned them against me. He even had his girlfriend send me long, passive-aggressive texts about how important family unity is. I almost caved. Almost. Then I got a call from Grandma's lawyer. "I thought you might like to know," he said. "Your grandmother added a stipulation to her will before she passed." My stomach clenched. "What kind of stipulation?" "She left a letter for you. It's in the safe at the house." I drove out that afternoon. Walking into Grandma's house felt like stepping into a memory. The scent of lavender and old wood, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The letter was waiting in the safe, sealed in her neat, cursive handwriting. "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, then you know I left you the house. I imagine your brother isn't taking it well. Don't let him bully you, sweetheart. You were always the one who understood what this home meant to me. Not just walls and a roof, but a place where a family can feel safe. That's why I'm trusting you to keep it that way. P.S. Check the drawer under the kitchen sink. Under the sink, I found a small lockbox. Inside, the deed to the house, already transferred to my name. Grandma hadn't taken any chances. The next day, Kyle showed up again. "Look," he said, trying to sound calm. "I've been thinking about what's fair." "You need to stop," I interrupted. His eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I'm not selling. I'm not signing anything over. Grandma made her choice, and I'm honoring it." "You think you deserve it more than me?" He spat. "No," I said softly. "I don't think either of us deserves it. But she trusted me. That's all that matters." Kyle hasn't spoken to me since. It hurts. But every time I sit on that porch swing and feel the warm summer breeze on my face, I know I made the right choice. Because some things are worth more than keeping peace. Story 3. My mother-in-law wore a wedding dress to my ceremony. So I gave her the attention she wanted. If you've ever dealt with a difficult mother-in-law, you know how exhausting it can be. No matter what you do, it's never enough. And if you dare to stand up for yourself, you're instantly the villain. I thought I was prepared for all of that when I married Daniel, but nothing, not even years of passive-aggressive comments, could have prepared me for what happened on my wedding day. Daniel and I met in college. He was warm, steady, kind, everything his mother was not. Evelyn was intense. She had an opinion about everything. When we got engaged, she insisted we have the wedding at her country club. I wanted a small garden ceremony at my grandmother's house. She complained so much that Daniel finally said, "Mom, this isn't your wedding, it's ours. Please respect that." She sniffed and said, "Fine. But don't come crying to me when it turns into a disaster." In the months leading up to the wedding, I tried. I really did. I invited her to the bridal shower. She criticized the decorations. I took her to lunch to talk about the seating chart. She complained about being placed at the wrong table. And when I showed her a picture of my wedding dress, an elegant A-line gown with lace sleeves, she smiled thinly and said, "Oh, that's nice. A little plain, but I suppose it suits you." Daniel noticed. He pulled me into a hug that night and whispered, "Don't let her get in your head. She's not going to ruin this for us." I believed him. The day of the wedding arrived. It was perfect. Soft sunlight streaming through the trees, birdsong in the distance, the smell of fresh lilacs in the air. I was standing with my bridesmaids, waiting for my cue to walk down the aisle, when I heard gasps ripple through the guests. "What's going on?" I asked. One of my bridesmaids peeked out and froze. Oh my God. Evelyn was walking down the aisle. In a white gown. A full-length, floor-sweeping lace and satin wedding dress, complete with a veil. I felt my stomach drop. Was this real? I peeked out and saw her, smiling like a queen, holding a bouquet, soaking up the shocked stares of our guests. My first thought was to burst into tears. My second thought was to scream. But then I remembered something my grandmother used to say. When someone tries to steal the spotlight, hand them the microphone. Let them embarrass themselves. I turned to my maid of honor. "Go tell Daniel I'll be a few minutes." "Are you okay?" she whispered. "Better than okay." When I finally walked down the aisle, the guests were still buzzing in hushed tones. Evelyn was sitting in the front row, smug and radiant in her bridal gown. As I passed her, I stopped. "Oh, Evelyn," I said softly, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You look beautiful. I didn't realize you'd be renewing your vows today, too. What a wonderful surprise." The guests tittered nervously. Her smile faltered. What? No, Oh, I just assumed," I said sweetly, "since you're dressed like a bride and all." Should we have the officiant do your ceremony first? By now, people were openly staring. One of Daniel's cousins snorted. Evelyn's face turned red. She stood abruptly. This isn't funny. I agree, I said gently. This is a serious moment. For me. And Daniel. She didn't say a word for the rest of the ceremony. Afterward, at the reception, Daniel took my hand and whispered, "You handled that better than I ever could have." Evelyn sat silently in the corner for most of the evening. People avoided her. She wanted attention. She got it. Just not the kind she hoped for. That was 3 years ago. Evelyn still complains that I humiliated her on purpose. And every time she brings it up, Daniel and I just smile and say, "Funny how you wore a wedding dress to someone else's wedding, huh?" Story 4. At our family reunion, I finally told my dad why we don't talk anymore. Growing up, my father was larger than life. He was the kind of man who could fill a room without saying a word. Broad shoulders, booming laugh, and an energy that drew people in like moths to a flame. But behind closed doors, he was different. He was the kind of father who believed fear and respect were the same thing. I left home at 19 with nothing but a duffel bag and a handful of tips from waiting tables. I didn't even leave a note. I just disappeared. For years, I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need him, that I didn't miss him. But the truth is, I carried him with me everywhere I went. His voice in my head whenever I doubted myself. You'll never make it on your own. When my cousin Sarah called me last summer about the family reunion, I almost didn't answer. "Everyone's coming this year," she said cheerfully. "Even Uncle Robert's flying in from Texas." I hesitated. "And your dad will be there too," she added gently. I almost said no. But then Sarah said something that stuck with me. Closure isn't for them. It's for you. So I went. The reunion was held at a big lakeside cabin in Vermont. The smell of barbecue drifted through the air. Kids shrieked with laughter as they chased each other through the grass, and folding tables groaned under the weight of potato salad, baked beans, and Grandma's famous peach cobbler. At first, it felt nice. Familiar faces, warm hugs, old stories. Then I saw him. My father stood by the grill, tongs in hand, laughing with my uncles. He hadn't changed much. Still tall, still broad, still commanding the space around him. For a moment I felt like a child again. Small, powerless. Then he turned. Our eyes met. And for the first time in 10 years, he said my name. Ellie. We talked later that evening, away from the noise. He sat on the porch steps, staring out at the lake. I stood awkwardly nearby, arms crossed. "You look good," he said finally. "Thanks." Silence. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted. "I wasn't sure either." Another pause. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for how things were, for how I was." I wanted to scream. To tell him sorry wasn't enough for all the nights I cried myself to sleep, for all the times I felt like nothing I did was ever good enough. But instead, I sat down beside him. "You know," I said quietly, "for a long time, I thought I hated you." His shoulders tensed. "But I don't hate you. I just needed space to figure out who I am without your voice in my head." "I know," he said, his voice cracked. "I know I hurt you. I can't change the past. But I'd like a chance to do better now." We sat there in silence for a long time, listening to the soft lapping of the water against the dock. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. That was 6 months ago. We're not close. Not yet. But he calls sometimes. We talk, slowly, carefully. Healing isn't linear, but it's a start. And that's enough for me. Story 5. My brother tried to trick our parents into leaving me nothing. When my parents announced they were updating their will, I didn't think much of it. They were both in their 70s now, still sharp as ever, but it made sense. They wanted to get their affairs in order. We're not planning to go anywhere soon, my mom joked over the phone. But it's better to be prepared. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. Of course, Mom. Whatever you and Dad decide, I'll support it. She paused for a moment. You've always been so thoughtful, Ellie, she said softly. My older brother, David, was not so thoughtful. David and I couldn't have been more different. I worked as a school teacher in a quiet Massachusetts town, lived in a modest little house with my husband and our 2 cats, and spent weekends baking or hiking. David, on the other hand, was ambitious. He lived in Florida, drove a flashy sports car, and had cycled through 3 marriages by the time he turned 40. He was always chasing the next big thing, real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency, but somehow, he never seemed to hold on to his money for long. 2 months after my parents mentioned the will, I got a call from my cousin Rachel. Ellie, I don't know if I should even be telling you this. My stomach tightened. What's going on? David's been staying with your parents the past few weeks. He says he's helping them out. But I think he's trying to convince them to leave him everything. At first, I didn't believe her. Sure, David could be selfish, but even he wouldn't stoop that low. Would he? I flew down to visit the next weekend. When I arrived, David was already there, sprawled across the living room couch like he owned the place. Ellie, he said with a too wide grin. What a surprise. Hey, David. Over dinner, he kept steering the conversation toward money. You know, Mom and Dad, I've been thinking about your house. If you ever needed someone to take it off your hands, I'd be more than happy to move in. Keep it in the family, you know? Dad chuckled. We're not going anywhere, son. Of course, David said smoothly. But you never know. And I wouldn't want Ellie to have to deal with all the upkeep. She's busy with her, what do you call it? Little teaching job. I clenched my fork. Little teaching job. Later that evening, I found Mom in the kitchen, stacking leftovers into Tupperware. Mom, I said softly, can I ask you something? She glanced at me. Of course, sweetheart. David isn't pressuring you and Dad about the will, is he? She froze, the Tupperware lid in her hand. Ellie, we've always tried to be fair with you two, but David's been saying some things lately about how you're comfortable enough and how he's the one who really needs help. Mom, I said gently, do you really believe that? The next morning, I sat down with both of my parents at the kitchen table. Listen, I began, I don't care about the money. I don't want your house or your savings. But I do care about you being manipulated. Dad sighed. We know, Ellie. We're not blind. Then why let him stay here? Mom smiled faintly. Because he's our son, and we wanted to give him a chance to show he's changed. She reached for my hand. But don't worry, sweetheart. We're not changing the will. Half to you, half to David, just like it's always been. And we've taken steps to make sure no one can contest it. When I left that afternoon, David was loading his suitcase into his car. You won, Ellie, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. This wasn't about winning, I said quietly. He slammed the trunk shut and drove away without another word. That was 6 months ago. Mom and Dad are still in good health. And David? Last I heard, he's already burned through another business venture. Some people never change. But I'm learning that you can't fix them. You can only protect the people you love and yourself. Story 6. My boss told me to do my job or quit. So I did exactly that. I used to think being a hard worker would protect me. I showed up early, stayed late, took on extra projects without complaining. But I learned the hard way that sometimes being the reliable one just means people think they can walk all over you. 2 years ago, I worked as a project coordinator for a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. It wasn't my dream job, but I liked my team, and the pay was decent. My boss, Todd, was complicated. On good days, he was charming and charismatic. On bad days, he was condescending, short-tempered, and impossible to please. Unfortunately, the bad days started outnumbering the good ones. It started when I volunteered to cover for a coworker on maternity leave. "Don't worry," Todd said with a grin. "We'll make sure you're compensated." I believed him. For 3 months, I juggled my own projects and hers. My inbox doubled overnight. I worked through lunch breaks and logged on from home in the evenings. When review season came around, I expected a bonus. Instead, Todd said, "We really appreciate your flexibility, but the budget's tight this year." I smiled politely and said nothing. But inside, something cracked. The final straw came during a Friday morning meeting. We were going over deliverables for a major client, and Todd was in rare form, interrupting people, shooting down ideas, barking orders. When I gently reminded him that I was already at max capacity, he sneered, "Maybe you should learn to manage your time better. You're not paid to complain, you're paid to work, so do your job or quit." The room went silent. I felt my cheeks burn, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Got it," I said softly. That night, I went home and updated my resume. By Monday morning, I had 3 interviews lined up. By Friday, I had an offer for a role at a competitor. Higher pay, better benefits, fully remote. I accepted immediately. The following Monday, I walked into Todd's office with my resignation letter. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "You told me to do my job or quit," I said calmly. "So I did both." At first he looked stunned. Then he smirked. "Fine, but don't expect a glowing reference." I smiled. "That's okay." My new boss already called one of our clients for a reference instead. Here's the kicker. 2 weeks after I left, that major client, our biggest account, followed me to my new company. Apparently, they were tired of Todd's attitude too. Now, I work with people who value me. And every time I log off at 5 p.m. without a single ounce of guilt, I smile. Because sometimes, the best compliance is leaving people to deal with the mess they created. Story 7. My landlord tried to evict me, so I took his building from him. I never considered myself a vengeful person, but when someone pushes you far enough, revenge stops feeling petty. It feels like balance. This started 5 years ago, when I was living in a rundown apartment building in Boston. I had moved in after college. Tiny studio, creaky floors, drafty windows. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. The landlord, Frank, was one of those slick, fast-talking types. Always in a suit, always with an excuse for why he couldn't fix anything. "The heat's broken again," I'd say in the middle of January. I'll get to it next week," he'd reply with a grin. I didn't have the energy or the money to fight him. Then, one spring, I got a notice taped to my door. "You have 30 days to vacate. The property is being redeveloped." I was stunned. When I called Frank, he was annoyingly chipper. "Sorry, kiddo. Nothing personal, just business. I've got a buyer lined up who's paying cash. Time for this old place to make me some real money." But I've always paid on time, I protested. Sure, but loyalty doesn't pay the bills. You'll figure it out. What Frank didn't know was that I'd been saving every spare dollar for years. I worked 2 jobs, graphic design during the day, bartending at night. And my roommate, Emily, was a law student. You know what he's doing is probably illegal, right? She said one night over takeout. That's when the idea sparked. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily and I started digging. Turns out Frank hadn't filed half the permits he needed for his redevelopment in the building, full of code violations, cracks in the foundation, outdated wiring, mold in the basement. We took pictures, documented everything. Then, Emily reached out to her professor, who specialized in tenant rights. While Frank was busy boasting about his big payday, we were quietly filing complaints with the City Housing Authority. By the time Frank's cash buyer showed up, city inspectors were already crawling all over the property. I'll never forget the call I got from him. Do you have any idea what you've done? He roared. Just protecting my home, I said calmly. The sale fell through. Frank was fined heavily for the violations. And since he couldn't afford the repairs, he was forced to put the building up for auction, at a fraction of what he'd planned to sell it for. Guess who bought it? Not me. I couldn't afford that. But Emily's professor. He had connections to a nonprofit that bought up low-income housing to preserve its tenants. They bought the building and let us stay at reduced rent. Frank, meanwhile, lost his big payday and filed for bankruptcy within a year. Every time I walk past the little garden we planted out front, I smile. Frank thought he could uproot my life for a quick buck. But in the end, he lost everything, and I gained a home. Story 8. The CEO who cheated his employees until they took over his company. I never thought a job could feel like a battle zone. But when you work for someone who treats their employees like disposable tools, it's a constant fight just to be heard. I was part of a small but growing tech startup in Austin, Texas. The company had promise, smart people, and enough funding to keep us afloat for a few years. Our CEO, Mark, was the classic ruthless executive, charming in meetings, cold behind closed doors. He'd brag about his vision, but paid us below market rates, denied overtime, and dismissed complaints as weakness. One day, after a 14-hour shift, I found out Mark had secretly sold off a chunk of the company's equity, without telling any of us. Basically, he was cashing out while expecting us to work harder to build his empire. The team was furious, but cautious. We didn't want to lose our jobs. But we started quietly documenting everything. Emails, pay stubs, meetings where promises were broken. One of our senior engineers, Lisa, had a law degree she'd never used. She suggested we form an employee coalition and take collective action. We reached out to a labor lawyer who specialized in corporate fraud. The lawyer confirmed that Mark had violated shareholder agreements and employee contracts. He was also guilty of wage theft and hostile work environment practices. We filed a class action lawsuit. Mark fought back, threatening layoffs and legal counterattacks. But we stood firm. After months of negotiations and media coverage, Mark was forced to step down. The company was placed under new management, an employee-elected board. We gained back lost wages, bonuses, and crucially, a share in the company's equity. We weren't just workers anymore. We were owners. Now, every time I log into the platform we built, I remember how close we were to losing it all. And how, by standing together, we reclaimed what was ours. Story 9. I've spent years pretending to be the perfect son, but I'm finally breaking free. For as long as I can remember, I was the good kid. The one who got straight A's, never got into trouble, and made my parents proud. I was their golden boy, the dependable one, the son they could brag about to their friends. But inside, I was slowly unraveling. Growing up in suburban Ohio, my parents set very clear expectations. Be the best, they'd say. Don't disappoint us. I lived by those words. In school, I pushed myself until exhaustion. In sports, I was relentless. Always training, always competing. At home, I hid my fears and doubts behind a smile. The problem was, none of that was really me. I was more quiet than outgoing. I loved reading and writing, not sports. I was scared of confrontation, often anxious. But I bottled it all up. I thought if I just worked hard enough, I could be the son they wanted. In high school, the pressure grew heavier. My parents started comparing me to other kids' classmates who were failing or going down the wrong path. I became obsessed with perfection. I missed out on friendships and fun because I was too afraid to disappoint. The nights spent crying alone in my room became more frequent. But I never let my parents see that side of me. College was no different. I studied business because my parents said it was practical. I hated it. But I buried those feelings. I joined clubs and internships, but only ones that would impress my family. I was trapped in a performance, a role I couldn't step out of. The breaking point came during my junior year. I was so stressed that I started having panic attacks. I told no one. One night, after a long day, I collapsed in my dorm room. My roommate found me shaking, unable to breathe. It was the first time I admitted I wasn't okay. From there, things slowly began to change. I started seeing a counselor. I opened up to a close friend, Sarah. I told her everything, the expectations, the fear, the exhaustion. She listened without judgment. She helped me see that being perfect wasn't the same as being happy. But telling my parents was the hardest part. I waited until winter break. I sat them down and told them about my anxiety, the pressure I felt, and how I'd been struggling. Their reactions were mixed. My mom cried and hugged me, saying she just wanted me to be healthy. My dad was quieter, confused, but supportive. Since then, I've been slowly redefining myself. I changed my major to English, something I love. I joined a creative writing group. I'm still learning how to say no, how to set boundaries. It's scary, but freeing. I still struggle with guilt. I wonder if I'm disappointing them. But I'm learning that my worth isn't tied to their approval. I'm learning to be proud of me. I'm sharing this because I want anyone listening to know. You don't have to live up to someone else's idea of you. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to ask for help. You are enough. And tonight, as you close your eyes, I hope you feel a little lighter, a little more free. Because breaking free is the first step to truly finding peace. Story 10. When my sister's secret destroyed our family, I had to choose sides. Family is supposed to be the one place you can always feel safe. But sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones who hurt the most. I never imagined my sister Rachel would be the one to tear our family apart. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, Rachel and I were inseparable. We shared secrets, dreams, and late-night talks about the future. She was 2 years older, fiercely protective and full of life. Everything changed the summer before our senior year of high school. Our parents sat us down one evening, serious and quiet. They told us they were separating. The house would be sold. We'd be splitting time between two new homes. Rachel took it hardest. She retreated into herself. We fought more often over small things that spiraled into screaming matches. I missed the sister who used to tell me everything. Then, months later, the secret came out. Rachel was hiding a part of her life she didn't want anyone to know. She was pregnant. The news hit our family like a thunderclap. Our parents were stunned. Friends whispered behind closed doors. And Rachel? She shut down completely. I tried to be there for her, but she pushed me away. I can't handle this, she said one night, tears streaming down her face. I'm scared, and I'm alone. The tension at home was unbearable. Arguments erupted over everything. Our parents clashed about how to handle the pregnancy. I felt torn between wanting to support Rachel and trying to keep peace. One night, Rachel confessed something that broke me. She had been keeping another secret. The father of the baby wasn't who anyone thought. It was someone dangerous. Someone who had hurt her before. She begged me to protect her, to not let the family find out. I promised her I would. But secrets like that don't stay hidden. Rumors spread. Our family fractured. Our parents blamed each other. Rachel became isolated. And I was stuck in the middle, trying to hold the pieces together. It took months to heal. Counseling sessions, long talks, apologies, and forgiveness. Rachel finally found the courage to confront her past. She cut ties with the dangerous man. Slowly, our family began to mend. We learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about standing by each other through the worst. Now, years later, Rachel's baby is a bright, joyful toddler. Our family isn't perfect, but it's real. And sometimes, that's enough. If you're holding a secret that feels too heavy, know you're not alone. There's strength in vulnerability. There's hope in healing. And there's peace waiting on the other side of pain. If you're still awake, thank you for spending your time with us. We'd love to have you back tomorrow night, so go ahead and subscribe. Tap like if this video helped you unwind. And let us know in the comments what kind of stories help you fall asleep. Sleep well. See you in the next one.